Well, good morning. At least it's morning to me. I don't know what it might be for you. It could be 11 o'clock at night, could be 3 in the morning, but that's the beauty of online classes, right? So I'm following up to some text that I put in one of the modules. I realize, by the way, that a lot of you have probably already scouted out the course a little bit. You've seen what's coming up. So I may bore a few of you, but I'll take my chances, and maybe reinforcing some of these things will be a good thing. So this is my opportunity to tell you a little bit about the course, a little bit about me, and get you comfortable with the things that we're going to be doing this term. There are certain things that are standard to all English 101 classes. I'll talk about those in a minute. Certain things that are standard to all online classes. But there are a couple of things that are unique to my class, this particular English 101, that I want to tell you about. I try to keep it fresh. I've been teaching for 40 years now, and English 101, it sounds like the most dull course in the world. Anything 101 just seems mind-numbingly basic and boring, but we'll try to put some punch into the class. And the way I'm doing it this semester is with a theme that I call the Read Less Traveled texts that you would not have encountered in college. Maybe you have an idea of the kinds of things that you read in college, and maybe it scares you a little bit. We're not going to read the Scarlet Letter again, are we? By the way, Hawthorne's short stories are very readable. Don't give up on Nathaniel Hawthorne. So the idea here is that we're going to be reading a few things that are off the beaten path. They're not your standard model essays that you would look at and say, this is exactly how I want to write. They may not, I don't even want to give the reasons quite yet. I think you'll figure them out. And I'm going to read a couple of samples, starting with one right now, of the kind of thing that you might expect in this class. So this is from a quarterly periodical that I get, and my particular screen shows things backwards. Maybe I can figure that out before the term is over. This is called Lapham's Quarterly, and it just collects all kinds of interesting art objects and poetry and essays from people all over the world and all over the history of ideas and artworks. It's very unusual and I think very interesting periodical. But the piece I'm going to read comes from 1967, and you might have known that anyway from some of the language that you'll hear in it. This is an excerpt from the Scum Manifesto, and I did not misspeak. That's SCUM. That may be an acronym. Historians are debating that issue, whether it stands for something. But the word carries pretty powerful connotations. And this is from a woman named Valerie Solanas, and I'm just going to read you an excerpt from it. The conflict is not between females and males, but between scum, which is a particular kind of female, dominant, secure, self-confident, independent, violent, selfish, nasty, proud, thrill-seeking, freewheeling, arrogant females, who consider themselves fit to rule the universe, who have free will to the limits of this society, and are ready to wheel on to something far beyond what it has to offer. Versus nice, passive, accepting, cultivated, polite, dignified, subdued, dependent, scared, mindless, insecure, approval-seeking daddy's girls, who can't cope with the unknown, who want to hang back with the apes, who feel secure only with Big Daddy standing by, with a big, strong man to lean on, and with a fat, hairy face in the White House, who are too cowardly to face up to the hideous reality of what a man is, what daddy is, who have cast their lot with the swine, who have adapted themselves to animalism, feel superficially comfortable with it, and know no other way of life, who have reduced their minds, thoughts, and sights to the male level, who, lacking sense, imagination, and wit, can have value only in male society, who can have a place in the sun, or rather in the slime, only as soothers, ego boosters, relaxers, and breeders, who are dismissed as inconsequents by other females, who project their deficiencies, their maleness, onto all females and see the female as worm. But scum is too impatient to wait for the de-brainwashing of millions of assholes. Why should the swinging females continue to plod dismally along with the dull male ones? Why should the fates of the groovy and the creepy be intertwined? Why should the active and imaginative consult the passive and dull on social policy? Why should the independent be confined to the sewer along with the dependent who need daddy to cling to? A small handful of scum can take over the country within a year by systematically, bad word, up the system, selectively destroying property and murder. 1967 from Valerie Solanas. And you can read the whole thing. It's a very long manifesto, which is a big statement of someone's belief system. It's very easy to find on the internet. So not everything we read will be right like that, but it won't be Romeo and Juliet. It won't be The Great Gatsby, although I love one of those two pieces. It'll be different kinds of stuff that we'll read this semester. So I want to alert you that this is a very intense class, and since it is online, it requires discipline. There's something comforting and routinized about going to a class twice a week. It's always at 8 o'clock. It's always at 9:35. It's always 85 minutes. And you get into that routine, and it's kind of built-in discipline. You have to have your own discipline in this class. And this is something I've discovered because I've been taking a class. I'm in my 5th week of an 8-week training class so that I can be certified online. By the time you hear these words, I will be certified. I know exactly of what I speak, that it requires some discipline. So my class will have the same due dates that are very typical, I'm told, of online classes, and this is a bit of routine that I think will help you. Most teachers ask for their things on Friday at 11:59 and Sunday at 11:59, and I'll be following the same strategy. And the same applies to my class that I'm taking. And let me ask you, if the deadlines are Friday and Sunday, and you always know that Sunday is the real deadline, did I always have my work done maybe by Saturday? Wouldn't that be a good idea if I could just lie to myself and pretend it's due on Saturday, have everything in, and have a Sunday where I'm completely relaxed? By the way, I'm delivering this message on Sunday. No, of course not, because I always in the back of my mind knew that I had Sunday. Did I turn them in at 9 o'clock in the morning on Sunday, 2 o'clock in the afternoon, or more like 11:58? Now for me, my 11:59 is more like 9:59. So beyond that, I'm just useless. So I turned in a lot of stuff at 9:59, which is kind of my body's deadline. And so what I'm saying is, if that happens, great. I mean, some people need the pressure to produce good work, and that's fine. I'm not going to argue with how some of you work, but it does take some discipline to meet those two deadlines. Normally, in a face-to-face class, your work is spread out a little bit more evenly, and it could be in an online class, but many of us do not have the discipline to spread it out. So the things that are standard with this class are the fact that we have to produce, we, isn't that funny the way I do that? You have to produce 8,000 words of writing. That's because this class meets standards that are also acceptable at all of the CSUs and all of the UCs. So when you transfer, Berkeley needs to know that you've had a class that is equivalent to the same one that our students have been taking as freshmen and sophomore at Berkeley. And so we have to meet that requirement. There's also a research paper, which I'd like to think is very interesting and maybe a little bit off the beaten path as well, and might be interesting because you're going to have a choice of picking any historical figure, historical event that interests you. And that's just a bare bones, very sketchy idea of what the research paper is going to be. But that's required as well. And there's certain what we call CLOs. SLOs, student learning outcomes, course learning outcomes, and they are standardized as well. They're very boring, but they are the skills that we need you to have. They include things like avoiding plagiarism, picking the right sources, high quality sources, reading critically. The course is called Reading and Composition, and so we want you to be better readers and better writers, and these skills will serve you tremendously in your academic career and beyond. So those are the things that are standard. The unique things about my class are the readings, and of course I'm unique from other professors, for better or for worse. You got me. So let me get into some things that are in my syllabus, and I had recommended in the text that precedes this video that maybe you have the syllabus on another screen. I've got it over here, or have it printed out. A sheet of paper to take some notes on, unless you're really skilled toggling back and forth between your keyboard and my talking head. So my syllabus includes things that, again, are kind of standard for, why is that just, you need to behave here. Okay, that are just kind of standard for all classes. I call them the yada yada things. Not that they're less important, but they're the same kinds of things that you see in every professor's syllabus. Usually they say things like an attendance policy. You got to be in class, can't miss 2 weeks of class. It's different. You can go off on cruises. You can live your life however you want, as long as the work comes in. So some things that I want you to know about: we are going to have office hours. It looks like there won't be any physical time for us to meet in a physical office, but through Confer Zoom, which some of you may be familiar with, we will have 4 office hours a week. And I'm going to try and spread them through the week and through the day, so that hopefully all of you can attend at least one of those. These will be general office hours, so when you come to these office hours, you have to be prepared that other people will be in the room. So, anything that's personal, you'll want to arrange a Zoom meeting with me personally, or just talk to me through email. So these are kind of general questions. You may come on and just kind of listen in the conversation that I'm having with 1 or 2 students. Jump in. Maybe your questions get answered before you even open your mouth. In other situations, you might need about 15 minutes to clarify a reading or an assignment. Make sure that you understand what we're asking. And if it's agreeable to the other students, you could maybe read or screen share a paragraph or 2, and we could take a look at that together. The opportunity, if you have something that's more personal, you'd rather not share your essay, or maybe some difficulties you're having with the class or in your life even, you'll want to arrange a Zoom meeting with me. And all of these are done through links. In other words, I will put in the announcements section of your class shell a code and a link, and it'll be a recurring meeting. The office hours will be a recurring meeting, all 15, 5 weeks, whatever the case may be, and it'll be the same code all the time. So if you misplace it or you can't find it, it'll be up in my announcements, but it'll be the same all the time. Personal meetings, we'll set up a code, and that will work just fine. So a couple of things that you're going to need for the course: the textbook, or the texts for the class, include the Wall Street Journal, which has an incredible student rate of $4 a month. And so just calculate that out. You're not going to be paying a lot of money. They even have deals sometimes where it's $1 a month. You're getting a world-class periodical that comes out 6 times a week, and you're getting it for, I don't even know what that works out to, about 16 cents an issue or something like that. It's an amazing deal. High-quality journalism, book reviews, puzzles, not a whole lot of pictures. Well, actually plenty of pictures and graphics, and regular news, columnists, everything that you would expect in a full daily newspaper. And it's national and international in scope. So if you have the Modesto Bee, great. but this supplements with more national and international news. So I'll be drawing some readings from there. Other readings, including your first one by Sherman Alexie, will be right there in your shell. Just click on a link. Sometimes I paste it in. Very occasionally I may ask you to, I think it's helpful actually to print stuff out sometimes for the purpose of annotation. And so I've suggested that you print out. One of the requirements I'm going to mention in a second is I think you should have a printer. I would say that's not required. But you're going to have to pay for the subscription to the Wall Street Journal, and that probably won't come up until a week or two or even 3 into the class. Everything else will be supplied to you either through links or directly in your Canvas shell. You need the most computing power you can have. I actually took a survey to see if I was a good candidate for online learning, and I failed every single one of the criteria. I don't type. I'm still trying to learn to type with 5 fingers, and so my adjusted speed was 15 words a minute, which is just pathetic. It's recommended that you have some good typing skills to work online. Are you computer savvy? Do you enjoy working on the computer? None of those apply to me. Do you have strong computing power? I'm recording this on an iPad. I've got a borrowed laptop over here. Not the best, but at least I do have 2 screens. And I've recommended that you at least have your phone in addition to whatever device you're watching the lectures on. Lectures will show up probably about once a week. And so the more computing power you have, the better. Other things that you would need, a good dictionary, although I recognize that dictionary.com is perfectly capable for the kind of work that we'll be doing in this class. My iPad is sitting on the Webster's Random House Dictionary. It's very fat, it's very old. It doesn't include some really hip modern words, but you can get those from the Urban Dictionary or dictionary.com. I think you can even get the Oxford English Dictionary, which is an amazing tome. Originally it was about as wide as my arm span here, or you could get a smaller version that the print was so small you had to use a magnifying glass. And that includes not only what the word means today, but what it's meant at every time in history. Words have changed meaning a lot during the time of history. Shakespeare talks about the breath of his mistress reeking, and that sounds really bad, like she's been eating onions or something. But in his day, reek just meant to emit, to be emitted. He uses a word called quat, Q-U-A-T, which you won't find at all anymore. But it meant pimple, and it's used in Othello as an insult toward one of the characters. So that's even probably available. And I think that's really what I'm looking for. The last thing I put under what you need for the class is willingness to do extra work. If you've placed into 101, it's assumed that you have certain skills, but especially now with self-placement, you may not have those. And when I hand back the first paper, you may see that you're having trouble with running sentences together. Complete thought, and nothing in between, or just a comma in between, or sentence fragments. And I'm happy to work with you on those, and we'll do exercises, but you may need extra work on that. By the way, so I want you to have a willingness to do that, to put in the extra time if necessary. By the way, pretty much every resource that you would have in a face-to-face class walking around our beautiful campus is available online. You can get tutoring, research help, counseling help, both personal and academic, office hours with me, disability services. Those of you that have disabilities, if you're working through that program, you can get extra time for your work. Every video that I put up is expected to be closed captioned, or and my visuals there's a reader that helps people that maybe have visual deficiencies. So that's another thing that I wanted to cover in the syllabus anyway, was the resources. I also wanted to talk about, and if you have the syllabus in front of you, this is right below goals of the course. They're the standard ones that I mentioned. Course learning outcomes, what I expect you to know and be able to do when you finish this class. There's also one that I wanted to add. It's not official. It's unique to me, but I don't think it is. I think any teacher would want this. I want everything you read to move you. And it seems to me that if you read something and it doesn't move you in some way, with the possible exception of reading a list of names that people you're going to invite to your wedding, even that might put a lump in your throat. I don't know. But usually when we talk about something moving you, we mean move you to tears, or to get a lump in your throat, or to feel pity, or to go, oh, hand over heart kind of thing. But to me, if you're a little bit different after you read something than you were before, you have been moved. Maybe your political perspective has shifted a little bit. I've read some pieces on eating meat that have kind of made me doubt my carnivorous, omnivorous nature. But it might make you mad. That's a way to move you. This piece that I read, the Scum Manifesto, that probably freaked you out a little bit, maybe scared you a little bit, maybe empowered you. Yeah, you go, girl. Everybody's going to react differently. Is it okay if something makes you laugh? Heck yeah. That's a very healthy thing. And in the first major reading we're going to do, called Margin, it's one of his RXs. It's one of his prescriptions for having not enough emotional reserve. If you feel frayed and anxious and tense, your emotional margin is thin. A way to expand that emotional cushion that helps you deal with things that come up that are dangerous or scary or unnerving or worrisome. One of the best RXs he gives is to laugh. So I think to be moved to laughter is perfectly fine. Some things I read and I just go, I didn't know that, or I never thought of it that way. That's all good. So this applies both to the things that I'm going to ask you to read. I hope they move you. I can't guarantee that everyone will. We're going to read some graphic novels with interesting visuals. And I hope that everything you write moves me. This may sound a little harsh, but if I read a piece and I don't make any marks on it because every comma is in place, every word is correctly spelled, every sentence is properly written, there are no fragments, there are no run-ons, but it didn't move me, what was the value of that paper? By the same token, I've read things that have a lot of distracting errors, and I get a little frustrated. I'm marking, and I have to go back and reread sentences, but I say, man, behind this is some really great thinking. So I have to evaluate these things. And ideally, I want you to say interesting, profound, original, creative things with correct presentation. That's the goal. And I want you to get as close to that goal as you possibly can. Maybe it's a good time now to talk about safety nets, because I am going to call them as I see them. I'm always going to be either just flat out straightforward and direct. If I have to say something negative, I'm going to be kind about it. Maybe later in the term, once I know you a little better, I might joke with you a little bit. When I respond to papers, I also just chat. You say something interesting and I say, wow, I like that band too. Or, oh man, you went to the falls after that big rain? That must have been beautiful. So we're going to get to know each other, and we're going to chat back and forth. But if the paper is not up to the standard, I will have to tell you so. And so I will give D's. I may give F's. But there are a bunch of safety nets in this class that I want you to know about. There are a number of things that you'll do where you'll earn points pretty much for just doing them. I don't want that to be too much, because that skews the grade too much upward. A student, I wouldn't want a student who really is not ready to go on from 101 to be able to pass the class because he or she did everything. I don't want my doctor to just have done everything in medical school. I want him or her to have done everything well. If he's going to be going into my body and playing around with my heart and my liver and my gallbladder. Same applies for you. I will be honest, and I want your grade to reflect your abilities as a reader and writer. But I very much value hard work and discipline. And so there's some things where it's worth 5, you'll probably get 5, whether you're a great writer or not. The bulk of the grade, the major papers are going to be worth up to 150 points. The smaller stuff, 5 points, 3 points, 10 points. So I would say the smaller stuff is going to add up to at least a paper, that the equivalent number of points. And every semester I tell students that, and every semester I have students who just don't do the little stuff. In this case, they wouldn't listen to the lectures. If I have anything remotely optional, they wouldn't do it. They wouldn't do the small stuff because they say, okay, that's only 3 points, that's 5 points. But collectively, that all adds up. It's worth essentially a paper. So I think that's a good opportunity. If you're a B writer wanting to get an A, you can do that. And obviously, I'm going to be available by email, by Zoom, to help you with your writing. I put somewhere in my syllabus, I will never waver from my goal of wanting you to be the best writer you can be. So back to the safety nets, one of those is the small stuff will really add up. Secondly, you will be able to revise one of the longer papers. So let's say you make a 71 on your first out-of-class paper about that book Margin that I was talking about. And I'm not a C minus. No, I don't accept that. You look at my comments, you see all the grammatical corrections I made, you see that I thought your paper was too short, I thought that you slightly misunderstood the concept of margin. You take all of those comments, you rewrite the paper. I do something in my grade book called excuse. I put a new grade in. Let's say I feel like it's a B plus now. I put the 88 in, I excuse the 71. The 71 no longer applies to your grade. So that particular hypothetical student raised his grade by almost 2 letter grades. And that's not that unusual. I've had Fs go to As. More likely it's 10 points, but whoever turned down 10 points, I've never heard a student do that. So we've got the small stuff that adds up, we've got the revision, and you may notice, if you go all the way down to grade breakdown, that the final exam is worth 50 or 100 points. And there's a lot of other stuff in this syllabus, and I'll cover at least one more thing, I think, after this. The last safety net is that your final exam is worth 50 or 100 points. What that means is that if you do well on it, and I feel like it's going to pump your grade up, and I can tell by punching in both numbers whether it's going to help you or not, I'll count it out of 100. Let's say you made an A on the final. Would you rather have 94 out of 100 or 47 out of 50? If I punch both of those in, I'll see, and I already know, that the 94 is going to weigh more heavily, and it will punch your grade up a little bit. On the other hand, if you don't do well, let's say I feel like this is a kind of barely a D, I think you'd rather have 32 out of 50 than 64 out of 100. And you can trust me on this math. You can try and experiment at home, but it actually makes a difference. It sometimes makes a difference. So I think this takes a little heat off. You know that if you don't do very well on the exam, it's not going to be that damaging. But if you do well on the exam, it's going to really bring your grade up. Much more on that later. So the last thing that I wanted to say about the syllabus is that I don't know if it's come through already, but I'm kind of deadpan. I think I'm funny, and I think when you laugh at your own jokes, it's kind of cheating. So when I rip off what I think is maybe a good joke, or if I'm being kind of ironic or satirical or sarcastic even, or hyperbolic, I'm exaggerating something, I don't usually betray much with my face. And I'm 63 years old. I don't know if that's going to change. So I will try to be as clear as possible. and maybe save some of that stuff for a little bit later, but I want you to be alert to it. And you have to know that irony is a thing out in the world. Um, Bless her heart, my almost 4-year-old granddaughter doesn't understand irony yet. I think she's getting it now. She tries to make her own jokes. They fall pretty flat, but she's so adorable it doesn't really matter. But I remember one time, well, oh my gosh, I can tell this exact story. Her cousin, hope I get this right. She said, Amelia, you're so cute, I could just eat you up. And Amelia broke into tears and said, I am not a snack. I'm a human. Well, of course, Lauren was just joking and thought, and I remember my mom used to say, oh, you're so cute, I could eat you. You just look so delicious, I could just eat you up. That's what aunts and uncles do. But Amelia hadn't developed that sense of irony yet. She developed a sense of indignity. I am not a snack. I am human. I am a human. So you guys are at the point where you need to be aware of irony. It's out there. It's a powerful tool. I just was reading this morning about a piece called A Modest Proposal, written by Jonathan Swift in the 1700s. And it's very ironic. And if you read it literally, it's scary. But he's obviously, not obviously, apparently, but he's being ironic to make a point. Some of you may have read that. It's worth reading. It's a little difficult, written back in the early 1700s. So I want you to be alert and try to meet me halfway and try to understand this is kind of who I am. It may apply to my writings, my texts that you see in the Canvas boxes, in the modules, but also in my manner. And we're going to be reading a lot of stuff that is satirical and ironic. So there will be a syllabus quiz at some point. I think normally it's given in the first week. But we have a pretty busy first week, and plus I think it would probably be more valuable for you to revisit the syllabus later on. So the quiz on the syllabus, and it won't be a surprise quiz, I can't do those online, so you'll have plenty of preparation and warning about it, but I will want you to show me that you understand what's expected in this class, so there will be a quiz on the syllabus. So the last thing I want to do, and again this is covered in the modules hopefully clearly, is tell you a little bit about your initial assignments. Again, this is a reading and composition class, and I wrote something in one of the modules about some reactions I've gotten from students in a class that is clearly labeled reading and composition. So I'm at the blackboard, or the whiteboard, and probably it was a blackboard back then, and I'm writing the assignment. And I say, read pages 22 to 44. Write 3 paragraphs, and I hear from the back of the room, this was such an identifiable student response that my friends and I came up with a term for it. It's called a click sigh. And it's a way of conveying just disgust. Like, what? Are you asking me to do that? Are you asking me to read in a reading and composition class? Are you asking me to compose or write in a reading and composition class? So please don't take that attitude. I will tell you that I'm a very slow reader, and your reading assignments will be pretty gentle. I don't pile on a lot of reading. I am expected to get the 8,000 words from you, and I want you to read with care. I will say that maybe the difference is when you read something for me, I expect you to read it with great care, a couple of times if necessary. First reading is a very short one from Sherman Alexie called Superman and Me, in which he talks about how he learned to read. And that's to set you up for a discussion and ultimately an assignment in which you're going to create a series of questions that prompt you to say things about your reading experience. So the question might be, what's your favorite book? What's the first book you read? Do you remember some mistakes you made in reading the words initially? Did your parents read to you? Did you have a teacher that inspired you to read? Were you annoyed by the requirements to read certain books in certain genres? Did that turn you off from reading? I don't want to steal too many of your ideas, but these are the kinds of questions you're going to pose in the discussion. and then ultimately answer in something called a reading autobiography. And that can be written in bullet point form or paragraph form. Sherman Alexie's Superman and Me is kind of his reading autobiography. It's almost exactly what it is. And yours doesn't have to be as artfully written as that, but there are certain requirements. I'm looking for 3 pages, etc., etc. You're also going to write a short essay. I'm going to give you 5 prompts. You're going to pick one and write me an essay. And then I grade it in something called Speed Grader, where I can make my comments, add my little notations, and then ultimately you'll actually be responding to all of my responses. Finally, we try to duplicate the sense of community that hopefully develops in chemistry, even in a face-to-face class, through the online medium. And we do that a number of ways. I just completed like an online cafe, basically an opportunity for you to talk to your classmates about whatever and questions about the class. And so that's available to you. But I want you to get to know each other, or have other people get to know you through a kind of a fun little exercise that I've done for years. I'm going to ask you to create a baseball-style card of yourself. And I've directed you to many sources that you can see online to see what a baseball card looks like. There's a visual on the front, there's text on the back, statistics, fun facts to know and tell about where they were born, how many homers they hit, that kind of thing. Or you can create a video game avatar that you think represents you. Maybe one that's already out there, or one from an imaginary game of your creation. So it seems like a lot right off the bat, but you may have heard of the dreaded Carnegie unit. For every 3 hours or 3 units of a class, you're expected to do X amount of work. And I think I've met the standard just pretty much exactly as much as possible. And this is part of my certification too. If I haven't met it, my professor, Michael Smedshammer, one of the most helpful and amazing people on the planet, he will let me know that I've fallen short. And I want to get my online presence as solid as possible, my course as fair and rigorous and interesting as possible. So with that in mind, I'm going to read one more sample of the kind of thing that you might not encounter in college. And this is from a book called Dave Barry's Guide to Guys. And he makes an actual distinction between men and guys. Men are the ones who build the dams. Guys are the ones who see how far they can pee off the dams. If a child is acting up in school, a guy will teach him how to make armpit farts for the next time he goes to school. A man would send him to military academy. So he's talking about guys. Let's not mistake guys and men. And that's a distinction that's maybe not important right now. But just as the other piece wrote about men and women and their relationships and their relative value, Dave Barry is going to do the same. And in fact, the chapter I'm going to read from is Tips for Women, Chapter 4, How to Have a Relationship with a Guy. Valerie Solanas would say it's not worth it. Men are scum. But Dave Barry, I think, acknowledges that men and women are different, and I've noticed that in my experience as well. Tips for Women, How to Have a Relationship with a Guy. Contrary to what many women believe, it's fairly easy to develop a long-term, stable, intimate, and mutually fulfilling relationship with a guy. Of course, this guy has to be a Labrador Retriever. With human guys, it's extremely difficult. This is because guys don't really grasp what women mean by the term relationship. Let's say a guy named Roger is attracted to a woman named Elaine. He asks her out to a movie. She accepts. They have a pretty good time. A few nights later, he asks her out to dinner, and again, they enjoy themselves. They continue to see each other regularly, and after a while, neither one of them is seeing anybody else. And then one evening when they're driving home, a thought occurs to Elaine. And without really thinking, she says it aloud. Do you realize that as of tonight, we've been seeing each other for exactly 6 months? And Roger is thinking, so that means it was, let's see, February, when we started going out, which is right after I had the car at the dealer's, which means, let me check the odometer. Whoa, I am way overdue for an oil change here. And Elaine is thinking, he's upset. I can see it in his face. Maybe I'm reading this completely wrong. Maybe he wants more from our relationship, more intimacy, more commitment. Maybe he has sensed, even before I sensed it, that I was feeling some reservations. Yes, I bet that's it. That's why he's so reluctant to say anything about his own feelings. He's afraid of being rejected. And Roger is thinking, and I'm going to have them look at that transmission again. I don't care what those morons say. It's still not shifting right. And they better not try to blame it on the cold weather this time. What cold weather? It's 87 degrees out, and this thing is shifting like a goddamn garbage truck. And I paid those incompetent, thieving, cretin bastards $600. And Elaine is thinking, he's angry. And I don't blame him. I'd be angry too. God, I feel so guilty putting him through this, but I can't help the way I feel. I'm just not sure. And Roger is thinking, they'll probably say it's only a 90-day warranty. That's exactly what they're going to say, those scumballs. And Elaine is thinking, maybe I'm just too idealistic, waiting for a knight to come riding up on his white horse when I'm sitting right next to a perfectly good person, a person I enjoy being with, a person I truly do care about, a person who seems to truly care about me, a person who is in pain because of my self-centered schoolgirl romantic fantasy. And Roger is thinking, warranty? They want a warranty? I'll give them a goddamn warranty. I'll take their warranty and stick it right there, Roger. Elaine says aloud. What? Says Roger, startled. Please don't torture yourself like this, she says, her eyes beginning to brim with tears. Maybe I should never have... Oh, God, I feel so... She breaks down, sobbing. What? Says Roger. I'm such a fool, Elaine sobs. I mean, I know there's no knight. I really know that. It's silly. There's no knight and there's no horse. There's no horse? Says Roger. You think I'm a fool, don't you? Elaine says. No, says Roger, glad to finally know the correct answer. It's just that... It's that I need some time, Elaine says. There's a 15-second pause while Roger, thinking as fast as he can, tries to come up with a safe response. Finally, he comes up with one that he thinks might work. Yes, he says. Elaine, deeply moved, touches his hand. Oh, Roger, do you really feel that way? She says. What way? Says Roger. That way about time. Oh, says Roger, yes. Elaine turns to face him and gazes deeply into his eyes, causing him to become very nervous about what she might say next, especially if it involves a horse. At last she speaks. Thank you, Roger, she says. Thank you, says Roger. Then he takes her home, and she lies on her bed, a conflicted, tortured soul, and weeps until dawn. Meanwhile, Roger, when he gets back to his place, opens a bag of Doritos, turns on the TV, and immediately becomes deeply involved in a rerun of a tennis match between two Slovakians he has never heard of. A tiny voice in the far recesses of his mind tells him that something major was going on back there in the car. But he is pretty sure there is no way he would ever understand what, and so he figures it's better if he doesn't think about it. This is also Roger's policy regarding world hunger. The next day, Elaine will call her closest friend, or perhaps two of them, and they will talk about this situation for 6 straight hours. Meanwhile, Roger, while playing racquetball one day with a mutual friend of his and Elaine's, will pause just before serving, frown, and say, Norm, did Elaine ever own a horse? So I'd like to think, in addition to the humor, there's some truth behind that about men and women. Obviously, not applying to all men and women, but we're going to read stuff that's a little bit different. Frightening words from a feminist about. By the way, they think that the acronym SCUM stands for Society for Cutting Up Men. Dave Barry is not going to cut up men, guys, or women, but he might be a cut up. That was a pun. At any rate, those are some of the kinds of things way over here, way over here, way up here, way down here that we're going to be looking at this semester. So thank you for listening. I encourage you to look at all the modules, all the things I've put up. There's general stuff that applies to the whole campus and stuff that applies to my class. And I look forward to looking at your first discussion. Thank you. Goodbye.